Hi, I'm Elissa Gershowitz, editor-in-chief of the Hornbook Inc. I'm so happy to be talking to Jason Reynolds and Jason Griffin, author and illustrator of the 2022 Boston Globe Hornbook Award for Picture Book. Yes, picture book. Ain't Burned All the Bright.
Hey.
That's cute. Jason Reynolds was the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. He's the author of Long Way Down, As Brave as You, Look Both Ways, the Track series, Stamped, Stunt Boy, and several others, including My Name is Jason, Mine Too, co-authored with Jason Griffin and recently reissued. He's won a Newbery Honor, multiple Coretta Scott King Book Award honors, a Prince Honor, the Kirkus Prize, 2 Walter Dean Myers Awards, and an NAACP Image Award, among others. Jason Griffin is a fine artist and master collaborator, as it says in your bio. He was recently commissioned to do a mural for the Children's Cancer Wing at Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx, as well as a residency at the New Contemporary Art Museum in Amsterdam. Welcome, and thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
For those who don't already know, who are you to each other? What is your relationship?
Lovers.
We're breaking the news here.
Breaking news! Breaking news! Congratulations!
Thank you so much. No, honestly.
We're trying to go viral.
You know, it's what's interesting about that joke is that I don't know if it's all the way false, right? It's false in terms of us being romantic lovers, sure. But I don't know if it's false in terms of us being, in terms of sort of us loving one another and extending that love toward one another in a familial way, you know? And so it's a joke, but it's also like,
brotherly love.
Yeah, like there are so many other ways that one might consider what a lover might be. We think about it in a very sort of narrow way. But I mean, Jason is one of my closest friends. He's a soulmate of mine, and one of my soulmates. He's a brother to me and a collaborator and somebody that inspires me and that I admire as a person, as a human. Someone I've known since I was 15 years old. You know, so like it's far beyond sort of the creators of this particular book, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the brotherhood runs deep, you know, the friendship runs deep.
Yeah.
So you met when you were kids, basically, when you were teenagers?
Freshman year of college.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Freshman year of college.
What was that 2000, 2001?
2000.
Jeez,
my freshman year.
22 years ago.
22 years ago.
We've been buddies for over 2 decades.
Your hair was redder back then. You know?
Oh, are you commenting on my my cinnamon and sugar beard?
Exactly. It wasn't there back when we met, you know?
No, it was all cinnamon, no sugar. But you know, I've gotten sweeter with age, like a fine wine.
And have you been creating together since you were teens, or was it a little later in life that you started actually creating art together?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Jay.
You want me to take this one? So, you know, we met in college. We were friends and roommates. And we kind of supported each other's craft. You know, like Reynolds would come to the art studio with me and kind of hang out, try his hand at some painting. We could talk about that at another time.
You don't have
to. And I would go to Jay's, spoken word events, and we would kind of support each other's craft. And I think it was just like one of the many conversations that we had. It could have been in the dining hall, could have been on, walk through campus or in our dorm room, where we were just like, we really should try to combine our crafts. Wouldn't that be cool if we collaborated?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how it went. I mean, it's important to note that at the time, Jason's sort of artistic prowess most people didn't know about it on our campus because he was a business major. And he dressed like he's dressed today. He dressed in college. and so at no point would I have ever assumed that he was as brilliant of an artist as he was even back then. So when we lived together, it became this sort of discovery of like, wait a minute, look at all these sketchbooks and he had an artist studio and like, it was a very different thing than I imagined And so it happened organically in terms of us deciding to, it was a casual cavalier conversation of like, one day we should do something together. He was making my book covers. He was designing my.
That's right.
Yeah, I was doing poetry.
Let Me Speak. I remember
Jacob's
that one.
Ladder. Let Me
Jacob's
Speak.
Ladder.
Yeah, I was creating these poetry collections independently, selling them, out of boxes and doing that kind of thing. And he
Out of the trunk of your car.
Out of the trunk of the car, and he was designing the book covers for those two, right? So we were already collaborating, just in a different way.
Is that how My Name is Jason, Mine Too came about?
No.
What's the story there?
Story. That's a good story. What's the abridged version of this story, Jay?
I know, because we have to get to your book award winner too, but I'm curious about this.
This is
I feel
like
it's set the scene.
So the book that we collaborated on, we basically invested ourselves. It was a self-published book called Self.
Before my
name. Yeah, we made that, and we decided, we had no idea how the publishing industry worked. So we just decided like, oh yeah, we're gonna move to New York. Or I said, I'm gonna move to New York. Jay, you coming? And we basically hustled our way around the city with our book, dropping it off at magazines, giving it out to friends, just trying to figure out how to make that connection. It made its way onto a literary agent's desk through an actor friend of ours named Ernest, and she gave it to Joanna Kotler at HarperCollins. So it was actually our first book that landed us My Name is Jason, Mine Too. Our agent, the reason the agent picked us up was like, anyone crazy enough to invest this type of money into themselves and into this project is worth kind of a meeting with. And then she knew that Joanna Kotler would be super into what we created, and she was right. It was a match. And she brought us on and said, I don't want to change too much, but I want to work with you guys. And she coached us, mentored us through our first published book together. My Name is Jason, Mine Too, in 2009.
Yeah, but it was a 3-year process of her.
It took a little while.
Yeah, she was mentored. She coached us and mentored us, like in a way that most editors just don't have the time to do. So we could go to her office every month, and we would have basically like show and tell, where I would have to read aloud all the pieces. Jason would have to bring all the art and lay it out on the floor. They would move all the furniture. It was a very hands-on experience because she wanted us to really understand how to make a book. And so we have to give her that credit. I don't know if either of us get to be here, Jason as an individual artist, myself as an individual writer, or us collaboratively, without Joanna Kotler.
Facts.
So is this now your second published book together, or traditionally published book?
Yeah.
Second traditionally published book together. Yes, indeed.
And for those who have not yet read it, how do you describe this 400-page picture book?
Jay, you're awesome at this.
It never gets easier though.
I can drop words. 2020.
In 2020, Jason and I were trying to figure out how to make something. In 2017, we were trying to figure out how to make something. 2018, we were trying to figure out how to make it. 2019, we were trying to figure out how to make it. And in 2020, we were trying to figure out how to make it. Right? And when I say make it in this term, I mean like trying to figure out how to survive. How do we make sense of the madness that is the world in which we're living in 2020? I couldn't write. I struggled with my creativity in this moment. Jason had figured out a way to sort of tap into his by writing in small journals. And in the midst of a conversation, because we have sort of check-ins all the time, weekly, every 2 weeks, whatever it is, just to sort of download stuff with each other about our personal lives and our emotional lives and our physical selves and our medical selves and all that kind of stuff. And in the midst of a conversation, Jason said that these little notebooks were sort of giving him, they were serving as his oxygen masks. And that was the language that I was looking for to sort of help me wrap my mind around what it is that I was feeling. Because what I was feeling was asphyxiation, right? I was suffocating. And then I realized that everybody is suffocating, that the tear gas in the streets was suffocating, that George Floyd's death was a death by suffocation, that COVID was attacking the respiratory system, that the LA wildfires was changing the air quality, that everybody was sort of that everyone's air supply was being strangled socially, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, creatively, right? And that we were all looking for oxygen masks. And so this book was just the bearing witness of what that is, and the acknowledgement that in the midst of this strangulation, we found peace and joy through very small minutia, right? Through the banality of our lives, which we should all probably keep our eye on as we move forward in our realities and existences.
And the
Nailed it.
text. Like you were saying, it really, the idea of breath, the story is told in breaths.
Yeah.
It's 3 long sentences. The way that you're using breath as sort of metaphor in here, but also in all the ways that you were talking about, and also the reality of what it takes to take a deep breath, and to take a shallow breath, to just keep breathing in these times. So when I have so many questions about this. So I guess I'll start with, when you are writing, are you also speaking aloud? Are you, especially for something like this, where it needs to work as breaths and sentences, and
Sure.
how are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm definitely reading it, but I'm always reading aloud. To me, literature has everything to do with sound. I think anyone who's read any of my other stuff, my other works, knows that people always say, like, it feels rhythmic. It always feels rhythmic. That's intentional. It's just the way that I sort of think about language and literature. I think of like a natural rhythm, a natural pace. There is sort of it's catalyzed in a certain way, it's just the way I think of language and literature. And so I definitely was being read aloud, but it also, the breath thing, I also was thinking about, like, at the end of this, I needed to land in a place that feels like it's an exhale. Because when we talk about the 3 breaths, with the concept, the sort of subliminal concept is that, when you're a kid and you're going through the whole, you're upset or you're crying and you can't breathe, your mom usually says, like, come on, let's take 3 deep breaths, right? And that's supposed to bring you back to some sense of equilibrium. Right. And so I wanted it to feel sort of thanks to Caitlyn, Dlouhy, thanks to my past with Joanna Kotler, I wanted it to have a narrative arc. Even though there's only 3 sentences, I still wanted it to feel like a complete story, which means that it needed to resolve on an exhale point. I didn't want, usually my books end on a sort of, you're sort of holding your breath at the end, right? But in this book,
long way down. What happens at the end?
But for this one with Jason, it felt more appropriate to end more like we're breathing out, right? We're gonna find ourselves back in some sense of balance, hopefully.
Was there a narrative arc to the art, Jason Griffin, the same way that Jason Reynolds is describing, or were you thinking of the art as sort of a series? Was there a rhythm to the art in the same way, or was it sort of pieces that came together as you were working?
All the above. That's a great question. No, literally, it's all of the above. This was a unique project. It's different than our other books. The other 2 books that we made were kind of, like autobiographical almost, and kind of tangential, like a collection of pieces, like you're saying. And I still try to look at the pages of the book as a collection of pieces of art, not illustration, something that's, and to me what that means is something that kind of pushes the dialogue, that doesn't necessarily illustrate, for lack of a better word, the writing. It actually kind of pushes the viewer, the reader, to think about things differently. And when I was making this book, it was very actually helpful to have Reynolds' narrative arc. So, like, that's the thread that held the art together. And then that process was, all over the place, really. Sometimes I'd have in my mind a perfect piece for a line of text. and I'd go in the studio and I'd create it, and I'd put the image to text, and I'd look at it on my studio wall, and I'd say, you know, it looked better in my brain than it did on the wall. And so what was cool though about the process is that, you know, I had everything kind of gridded out on my wall. So kind of transitions and how one page flows to the next is very important to me. You know, like, this is not pieces on the wall in a gallery. This is a book. And when you turn page to page, the art and the text can carry you from page to page, and it can feel I wanted it to feel seamless. But I also wanted it to kind of follow the art, you know, and so I use color. I use, you know, my palette ranges. If you look at the beginning of the book, it's a lot of kind of blacks and reds. And it isn't until the third breath that you get to kind of more colorful spreads. And it had everything to do with what Reynolds wrote, and kind of trying to, you know, hold up the writing, and let the image live at the same time, you know, by itself, but also kind of, they play nice together. That was important.
It was so interesting too, the way that depending where you were in the story, you know, the natural world surrounding the family, it can feel comforting. They're together.
Sure.
It can feel claustrophobic. It can feel scary. It can feel frustrating and limiting, and they're penned in and helpless in some ways. So it just was such a interesting way to capture, I think, what so many of us were feeling at that specific time, and, you know, now, but certainly then, without being so explicit about, and then this was happening and we felt like this, and
Sure.
It just worked really, really beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this actually, the way you're describing it, it's not so different from a picture book process. I sort of had it in my mind that, well, it's a picture book, but not a picture book. I can see both sides. So the judges, the Boston Globe Horn Book judges, decide the categories, the winners in each category. We don't put that on. And so when they said, oh, and winner in the picture book, everyone sort of went, huh, okay, yeah, okay.
Yo, and shout out for that. That's awesome, by the way.
I was wondering if that was something that you all enjoy or thought, huh?
I mean, for me, I enjoy it. I also have been in this industry long enough to know how sticky it gets, right? So like, you know, but it's, I thought it was bold, and I thought it was a courageous thing to do, given that we have traditional parameters, and this book breaks those traditional parameters, right? As far as what we think of when we think of a picture book. And why not? Like, I understand the importance of category. I don't think one has to abide by them, though. And I think they can be more fluid and more malleable. And I hope that continues to happen, to be honest, right? I don't want to pull attention away from these genius picture book writers, traditional picture book writers, right? Like, listen, there are some geniuses in that space, right? But I also, and Jason and I have spoken about this, but I'm also curious about who has the moxie to ask the question, well, where does a book like this go? And can we figure out, right? Because we were really honored. This was a big deal for us because we know that everyone's wondering, well, where exactly do we put it, right? Is it a picture book? Is it a
graphic novel?
Is it a story? Is it a graphic novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it memoir? Is it poetry? I don't know. Is it an art book? Is it, right? And so I think both of us, at least for me, I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for the courage of Hornbook, and the sort of creativity of like vision, right? To say like, well, this does fit. It is a picture book, and let's award it for its merit. So thank you, you know.
Vicki Smith, Sujan Huggins, and Maura O'Toole, 3 judges this year. The creators are happy with you. I did want to ask about the actual bookness of it, because it's, you know, it arrives and it's heavy, and the pages are black. And how involved were you with the production, with these choices, did you know what it was going to be like? Did it arrive in your mailbox and you said, oh, this is exactly how I envisioned it? Or, oh, I'm surprised about this. It's a heavy book. It's beautifully made. So how was that done during COVID? You know, before COVID, you could be in and out of an office. You could really check the stuff. But how was that done in these times?
So that, I mean, to answer your question, the book exceeded expectations. It looks fantastic from an artistic perspective. I'm over the moon at the risk that Simon and Schuster and Caitlyn and her art director, Michael, that all of them took over there on this book, because delivering so we delivered this book pretty much complete, like 400 pages. It was a big risk, but it was also the right thing to do. Like, the book was creating itself. We had kind of negotiated with Simon and Schuster that we were giving them another book. This wasn't the book that we had negotiated, but this is the book that had to come out during 2020. And so, you know, I sent over to our editor, I sent Caitlyn, I want to say I sent the first breath first. And, you know, she was down. She was all for it. And we just kind of kept pushing the project along. And by the end of it, we were almost 400 pages, full color, you know, 3 really, really long sentences, but just a ton of art. Like, this is not a cheap book to produce. But, you know, the same way that Reynolds is expressing gratitude to Horn Books, I express my gratitude to Simon & Schuster for taking the same type of risk. Like, yeah, this is not something that's proven. You know, if you want to check out the discount table, you're going to see a lot of art and poetry books or art and prose books. Like, the, you know, we've been told this for over a decade, that art and poetry doesn't sell. And so for someone to take this type of risk, you know, I'm forever grateful.
Mm-hmm. Same. It's better than I ever could have imagined.
It's beautiful. I have many more questions, but I'm just going to ask a couple more.
Good.
I wanted to ask about the title, which in my reading references the main character's father, who's ill, but he smiles, and that, you know, he hasn't lost the bright inside of him. Is the title something that was with you from the beginning? Where did you land? How did you land on that title?
You know, there's been a few times in my individual career where titles are communal projects, you know, where titles are brainstorming sessions with a bunch of people. All American Boys was this way. When I Was the Greatest was this way. And Ain't Burned All the Bright was one of those moments too, if I'm not mistaken, right, Jay? I think.
Totally.
Yeah,
Caitlyn was firing off ideas.
Yeah, she does this, you know. If the title doesn't work, and listen, let me tell you something. Whenever an editor tells you the title doesn't work, it sucks at first, right? It's a bummer at first, because you're like, you know, you're married to a thing that, you know, you're married to a thing that sometimes was the inspirational gem that sort of sparked the whole idea, right? Like Oxygen Mask. You see what I'm saying? So you're like, and we had our own sort of, we had a few, I think, Breathe In, Breathe Out. We had a few title ideas, all of which don't work in retrospect, right?
In retrospect,
you know, and
along with like 10 different cover.
That's true.
Cover designs that I was sure each one was the best that I ever made.
Oh yeah.
Caitlyn stepped in with her own list of ideas, and Ain't Burned All the Bright was one of them. And once we read it, we knew that was the one. It was an obvious choice, you know.
So Jason Reynolds, I saw you on the Ashley Bryan tribute premiere video about a month ago. You told a story about Ashley Bryan eating copious amounts of bacon and telling you to live for your art. So I would like to know well, it's sort of a two-part question. Who have been both of your influences? And then with so many of our heroes and influences leaving us, How do you work to keep their message and their work alive?
There's a lot of influences for me, and so it's tricky. I think my most obvious influences, you have people like Walter Dean Myers, who I'm very close with his son, and who I got to meet, and who gave me advice, and so I read my work early on, and I'd like to believe that I'm honoring him every day. I mean, this is the work he did. The books that I've written over the course of the last however many years are in the direct tradition, the direct vein that he set forth, and I hope wherever he is in the ether, I hope he's proud, and I hope I just hope he feels honored and respected that I have taken it so seriously and I've been so intentional with the work that I've done. There's so many other people that I could call on that I think are just really, really influential, from Toni Morrison to Jacqueline Woodson to Ali Smith to all sorts of artists and dancers and painters. I told Jason yesterday, I was talking to him and was telling him just how much his work has been an inspirational sort of grounding point for me. And even more than his work, I think his process is what I'm most inspired by, what I'm most fascinated by. I mean, we're sort of process nerds. People think it's all just sort of sparks of creativity, but people don't know that it's really, really, really rigorous process. And he's a process guy in a very real way, and people don't get to see that part, but I've been privy to see that part for 20 years. And so I value that in my own work. And so he's up there in my people who inspire me as well.
Thanks. What about you, Jason?
Oh man, well, I'm gonna have to ditto that. Jay is definitely one of my archetypes, one of the legends in my mind. We spoke a bit about Joanna Kotler earlier, and she took us under her wing, and she's mentored me since. She's been there for me, through good times and bad, and I shout her out. And then, like Jay said, I draw on inspiration from different people every year. I feel like it's constantly evolving. Of late, James Baldwin has been a huge inspiration as I'm, doing a lot of therapy and understanding kind of the importance of understanding the simple fact that the only person that you can control is yourself. You can't control anybody else, but to be mindful and to be, kind of empathetic, try to see the gray area in things. And, my kids too. My kids are a huge inspiration. I love seeing the world through their eyes as well. It's always a surprise. It's always kind of, they say things that just catch me off guard, and my favorite people in the world, to be honest. Yeah.
All right. Well, I could stay here all day talking to you, but I will wrap up by just thanking you again so much, and congratulations again. Thank you for giving us this memory of the times that we've been living through.
Can I say really quick before we wrap up? I also just want to shout out Caitlyn. I just want to shout out Caitlyn. I think, and she doesn't like when we do this. She's very bashful in certain ways, but I just
humble, man.
Very humble. That's a better word. And but I just want to say, beyond her ability to edit, which is, by the way, otherworldly, masterful at sort of marks on the page, I just want to really take my hat off to her courage. We've thrown some interesting sort of things at Caitlyn. I individually have thrown all sorts of things at Caitlyn, and she never flinches, and always sort of, it's interesting. It feels more like a partnership, like she trusts the partner as much as we trust her. And I don't want to, it's important to make sure publicly that we acknowledge her, because she is the third partner, the third collaborator, the second on all my books and the third on our books. And I want to make sure that's known to the public. She's bright red right now, unfortunately, and I apologize in advance, but it is what it is.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. It was wonderful to talk to you.
A pleasure.
Thank you so much.